London, the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, a night in January and curtained down at the 21st anniversary performance of Sir Frederick Ashton's Female Garden. And taking a call on the stage, Ashton himself, of course, and some of the members of the original cast, and the designer, Sir Osbert Lancaster.
I like those.
It was a birthday for the Royal Ballet, but it wasn't the only one this year, because in May, the 5th of May, 1981, they were to celebrate their 50 years. And this film marks that anniversary. The work, the people, the achievements. It celebrates a half a century of dance. But 50 years seen not so much by looking back, though we'll hear from the great names who helped to build this company, but rather by looking at them now, what they do now. The work done here, for instance, at their school, premises shared by school and company, here at Barons Court, West London. The Royal Ballet now. One day, in fact, in their life, but a day that stretches over several months so that we can follow things in preparation and see the scope of what they do. And this day begins with the students who've already been working here an hour or so, handing over the company their studios. It begins, as always, as every morning in the ballet, the same the whole world over. It begins with class.
Press front, in.
You need to be slightly mad to start off with to make yourself do it, to go in every day.
Your legs feel achy and your feet hurt.
You sort of do it without thought, really.
Like cleaning one's teeth.
Having breakfast.
Gets the blood rushing and wakes you up.
Oh, careful. Once more. Port de bras, forward and back, and all the way around.
Now from there you go, use your arms, now use your brain as well, and up, and through, and this is the lifted one.
1.5 hours of it. 3 studios full, every day, including Saturday for those who want it.
I haven't got the kind of body that can work without doing class every day.
If you start walking out and copping out, then it becomes a habit.
It's so easy to just lie in bed and think, I just can't cope this morning, I won't do class, I'll go in for the 12 o'clock rehearsal. And it's fatal, because you end up doing it more and more, and your technique, which is the big thing that you rely on, just goes down the drain.
But there's not just one Royal Ballet Company. 200 miles away, the touring wing, called Sadler's Wells Royal Ballet, move into a theatre in the provinces. And with class still going on, in the London suburbs, in Richmond Park, at White Lodge, which was once an actual royal residence and is now a Royal Ballet boarding school, the very young have quite a different kind of class.
That is the Sahara Desert. The word Sahara is Arabic. It's an Arabic word and it actually means desert. Don't arch anybody behind you, those attitudes. And up, that was an effacé. And strong, that's smooth, still.
The scale of it, the size of it, I mean, I had great hopes of it being a prominent company in the country. but I didn't really visualize quite the size it would grow to.
1931, the beginnings. Not called the Royal Ballet then, but the Vic Wells Ballet. 6 girls and the founder, Ninette de Valois, who danced with Diaghilev.
He always had this feeling about England. He used to say, in fact, that he thought the next ballet company would come from this country.
Because nobody thought at that time that it could ever happen, except Ninette. Ninette never doubted for 1 second. That was her strength.
There was a sort of nucleus at that time, and we used to have to supplement the corps de ballet with the opera chorus, doing the sort of walking on part.
The girls were all rather dumpy, if I remember rightly. But we were all very enthusiastic.
They had a love of the theatre for the sake of the theatre. That's why they came. They couldn't come for any other reason.
And we wouldn't have dreamt of asking where we were going or what we were going to do. You'd be told, that's no concern of yours, young man. You just get on and learn your rond de jambes.
But they were the real pioneering days, and that's when you don't mind how hard you work.
Sheer grit, sticking to it and getting on with it is, you know, what I think this is all about.
It's like any sport, you know, you're always going through a particular new time or length barrier.
We dance now for longer sections. You know, a variation in a classic is sort of half the length of, say, some of these movements we now have to do in the newer ballets.
That's what we're asked to do all the time, really, is push ourselves beyond what we think we can do.
And the result of hard work. Brian Shaw in a later television version of Ashton's first ballet for the company, Les Rendezvous. And Brian Shaw, now ballet master.
Change. Second group.
And stay still on point, but still. Thank you. Thank you. Good girls. You tried it all. Why are you on your chair? Oh, no, go away. On you go. Where you go.
After-class rehearsals, and a work in preparation that would launch the company's anniversary season, one will be following through to its first night. Isadora, a ballet by Kenneth Macmillan, once director and now principal choreographer of the company. Merle Park dances the title role in this ballet about the extraordinary American dancer Isadora Duncan.
I became fascinated with Isadora quite a long time ago. First of all, she was a revolutionary. There was classical ballet and not much else. And Isadora came along and toppled classical ballet on its head. She didn't wear point shoes, she wore no shoes. She showed her breast through her dress, which was very shocking. And she had many lovers. She had 2 illegitimate children who died very tragically. They were being driven in a car by a chauffeur, and they pulled up, and the chauffeur didn't put on the brake, and the car slid back into the Seine, and the children were drowned.
Sorry to interrupt, Norman, but the
Because everybody thinks I'm going to be funny. And so they're waiting for the laugh. And I don't think I should.
The company offices are at Baron's Court as well. Norman Morris, who used to run Ballet Rambert, is now director of the company. He was appointed 4 years ago.
One of my initial shocks was finding I couldn't automatically get round everybody in one day. For the size of productions we do, we need this size of company. Just a few major injuries can mean that you've got to have a backup, depending on whatever the newest crisis is. You certainly need everybody you've got, which in a way doesn't help relative to finding enough work for people.
We suffer badly through lack of performances.
I haven't been near the Opera House for 2 weeks, and suddenly I'm going to go on that stage next week, and it's not going to be familiar.
It's just that there is one house, and it is shared by two major companies, two big companies. The stage inevitably is split between opera and ballet.
I mean, it's something like at the most four performances a week, which is half the number you really need.
Each performance becomes a scaring ordeal. And the terrible thing is when we get perhaps to my age, well, I'm looking that, you know, when you begin to learn something of what the theatre's about and being able to round the role and flesh it out, the technique is beginning to go away because it's a very physical discipline.
You must never start to do them too late, when you've lost that wonderful nerve that you have when you're really young, when you don't fear.
And those who survive and go on really are superb, and that's when you get a true artist.
Good, Mel. Fine. Yeah, you got that right that time.
Yes.
But this one, can you turn the foot in more?
Yes, that's it. This one.
In other studios, other rehearsals. Jill Gregory, rehearsing the Waltz Girls in Facade. Music by William Walton, choreography Ashton, created even before he joined the company. A sort of parody of dancing in the 30s.
Now, home. Right. Oh no, that wasn't right. You do it, but I don't. I think you rest a bit. You don't really stick quite out enough on that each time.
Had a good cast. I mean, there was Mark Over to do the polka, who of course had a very strong technique. But it was very well cast, and I myself danced the tango with Lopakova.
There weren't all that many performances in those early years either, and everything was on a much, much smaller scale. The dancers danced in operas as well as on ballet nights, and the fact that they danced at all they owed to someone called the Lady. Lillian Bayliss, manager of 2 London theatres, the Old Vic, which was then a repertory theatre for plays and opera, and also Sadler's Wells, when it was reopened, and hence the ballet company's name, Vic Wells.
I don't know, where would it have been if it hadn't been for her? She listened, she had vision. And when I sat down in the office and talked to her, so many people would have just politely waited and then told me, very nice, thank you very much. And thought it was all a question of daydreaming. She didn't do it all very seriously. Bayliss is incredible.
When they were doing Fidelio here, for some reason I met her in the passage, and she was disapproving of the fact that the cells were too clean. And she said, "Look, don't you think it's all wrong? I mean, after all, in those days, they had to do everything in the cells," she said, "and it's all much too clean."
She said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm the newest student, Miss Bayliss." And she said, "Oh, do you believe in God?" And I said, "Yes, Miss Bayliss." So she said, "Good," and that was that.
There came an awful time every year. You had to go and talk to Miss Bayliss about money. And I went in. She said, "Oh, dear, I'm sorry. No, I'm terribly sorry, dear. We can't give you any more money this year. You'll just have to go on the same salary." And I said, "I don't want any money, Miss Bayliss." And she nearly died.
She said, "I have no money at all for the ballet. You can come into the place and we will start off, but I have no money for paying anyone."
Whenever one did a new production, she was always being given old clothes and coronation robes and everything. She would always, you had to go through this formula with her, of being shown all these things to see if you could use them. Of course, one never could, and never did.
She wasn't very knowledgeable and didn't pretend to be. In fact, she used to say to me, "I'm an ignorant old lady, my dear, but I know who knows.
And when the company did their first television in the 30s, This Is Facade, she said it's all much, much too small. It won't help any of these girls to get herself a husband.
And that's it.
It's the 5. I've got to remember then rather than 6.
Act 1, backfill. We'll leave this one, and we'll go to lunch now.
Every hour or half hour there are new rehearsals. Giselle, with Monica Mason as the Queen of the Willies.
I thought your eyes came down very rapidly, just a little bit too soon, too quickly.
Taking the rehearsal, Norman Morris and Gerd last.
That's it, right. One isn't conscious of anything but this floating, implacable thing.
All right, 3, 1, yeah, just for counting.
Troy Game, restaged by its choreographer Robert North and notator Faith Worth, who's had to take most of the earlier rehearsals.
So do you think we could just change that per minute?
Yeah.
The set for Isadora, Macmillan with designer Barry Kay.
So we'll have to vary, in actual fact, where the piano actually goes. Yeah.
Now, her rival has to sit opposite.
I see. Oh, well, that's fine.
Because she's wearing the same necklace.
Yes, all right. It gives us much better surround.
Yeah.
It's much better, can it?
You don't mind?
Absolutely not.
Well, mine seems to somehow click on and off into whichever ballet you're doing. You don't get muddled up.
I remember when I was on tour that we used to change the program every 2 or 3 days, and people used to come and say, how do you remember it? I mean, how do you remember it? You just hear the music and just switch on.
We've got a beautifully organised system of calls. I mean, lots of other companies, the dancers sit around almost all day waiting to find out when they're going to be needed.
You go into a routine and you just know what rehearsals you have and you pace yourself accordingly.
Probably we're unique in the world with our range of repertoire, that we attempt many styles, trying to help the public to appreciate that ballet is not this very narrow classical or romantic thing which they fondly imagine it to be.
Come on down. Da-da. Yes, now, if... That, yes, I know, that often happens. I think...
Another rehearsal for Giselle, and this time Albrecht and Giselle. Repetiteur, Michael Soames.
And then you start again.
Wayne Eagling and Jennifer Penny, both of them originally from Canada.
So you do. Da-dim, da-dim, da-da-da, da-da-da, da-dim.
1934, the first Giselle, the first Nutcracker, the first Swan Lake.
That was very important. Alongside the English ballets we're doing, the classics were included.
Because we came in just at the right moment. The exiled ballerinas and dancers in Paris were young enough still to really be able to pass on their knowledge.
And I got Sigev, the Russian who was in Paris, to come over here with his notation, and he put them all on for us. And the inspiration for that was Diaghilev. As soon as I joined his company, I realized what it meant and that he was developing everything he was doing from a great tradition.
The tradition of Fokines Sylphide, first danced by the Vic Wells in 1932, this film version shot in the 60s.
My ideal romantic ballet. I think it's wonderful. I love it. It seems to me a development of all the core work in Giselle to a state of complete perfection.
The classics are everything to our company, and they're bread and butter.
It's a point of departure for everything, the maintenance of technique, the knowing the rules that you're rebelling against, if you like.
So one has to keep life going in the old tradition and make sure at the same time that you're giving stimulation for the future.
Show the position, show the position. 3, 4.
What about up? Okay. No.
With the music, we can see how much
fine,
you really need.
You know, there isn't much time.
But
for this
they'd be
thing.
quite quick images.
Yeah. If this is gauze, are we going to see this enough to begin with?
Yes.
You are?
Oh, yes. I'll do it on shark's tooth, so it'll be quite clear.
Have a casting for the rehearsal of Troy game tomorrow.
Covent Garden once again, this time for a stage call for Troy Game and costume fittings for Isadora.
Just at a bad length, I think. Don't you?
You'd like it either shorter or longer?
Yes, yes.
But that's, if we go much shorter, much shorter. How short was the one that we had in the rehearsal?
Oh, that was
very
about here.
Yes. Robert Dew for Graham Fletcher. What's the problem with Flecky? Wainsley, yeah. Anthony Dowson.
When everyone starts going through, when they make that little passage going around here, the people has to go through, and then that way. When everybody falls down. It's just never been together.
This sort of tiddling about with no music there. Is there usually a big gap?
I can fill that out. I
Right.
can fill that out.
Business-like show.
Are we going to build her bust up a bit?
She has. I've already got some plans.
But we can do a bit more.
Hardly more than a mile from Covent Garden, Sadler's Wells, and back for a week in London, the touring company, Sadler's Wells Royal Ballet, rehearsing in this theatre which is so much a part of the company's history. For after several years away from it, Sadler's Wells in Islington is once again home to this part of the Royal Ballet.
Same kind of thing again, just a bit more round on the last one.
For the last one to get over.
David Bintley, one of the brightest young choreographers of the company, at work with Marianne Tate and David Ashmole. It's through a choreographic group run by Leslie Edwards that dancers like Bintley gain their first experience. But the touring company is a good place for them to develop as choreographers.
This one, if you bring her up that way, you can't just lean out just a bit that way on the...
Peter Wright is director of Sadler's Wells Royal Ballet.
We are getting the creative side so fertile, partly because of having our working base at Sadler's Wells with proper studios where choreographers can work in peace. It's incredible to think, you know, until a couple of years ago, we led such a nomadic existence that when we came back to town, we didn't have anywhere actually to keep all our stuff. We didn't have our real offices or anything. But now we have got our own place, and I think this has really led to the fact that the company has found its identity.
It's quite nice. I don't know. Maybe take it a bit more open than that way. Yeah?
For centuries, there'd been a theatre on this site. In 1931, it had been rebuilt and reopened, and so, in a sense, it gave the company their real birthday.
It was such an excitement getting a theatre and being here. It was very beautiful, actually.
We used to rehearse in the coffee bar there, and all that you see today has sprung from that, which is really rather fascinating when you look at the size of that place.
People really didn't mind. It's always been a pleasant part of London to be in. We felt very much on our own. We were called by one of the newspapers the Islington Dancers, which I always found most poetic and romantic. I lived in it. Fred had a house near here, and gradually they moved in, a lot of the company, but it took a little while because the houses then weren't in the condition they are now.
The great names of the 30s. Constant Lambert, composer and company musical director. Markova, who danced in the first years with them. Anton Dolin too. And then boys and girls like Michael Soames, of course, like Margot Fonteyn, and like a young man from Australia, noticed particularly by Lillian Bayliss, Robert Helpman.
I had too much brilliantine on his hair, she said. I can't take my eyes off him, and I murmured that may be his idea.
And she said, oh, well, if you've got to give him a contract, he's got a nice little bottom.
Pushy elements, he brought. Quite a bit of Australian determined to get there.
I didn't want to wait. I wanted them to notice me. Quickly, you know, I couldn't be bothered waiting.
I can remember Margot Fonteyn the first day I saw her in class.
And I tried to make her more mobile and everything, and she went back to her mother and said that I was mad.
He sort of kind of swooped and bent over and turned round and did something or other that wasn't any ballet step that one learns in class, and I just couldn't do it to save my life.
At the end of one of the rehearsals, she finished her variation. I said, it's no good at all, and everything, and then she sort of came and burst into tears on my shoulder. And then I knew I'd won, you see, and so from then onwards we had perfectly amicable association.
But we had to move with our own times, and we had to move with our own country. A lot of English composers were used at that time, which I think is very interesting. English designers, very English atmosphere.
Very English indeed. The Rake's Progress, based on the famous Hogarth prints, choreography by Ninette de Valois, music by Gavin Gordon, first produced in 1935.